32 teams, 32 days, and today, the New Orleans Saints. Welcome to a series where we deep dive on every NFL team's offseason, everything from the beginning when coaches are being hired, all the way to present day with training camp and preseason happening. Here's a list of videos of the teams that we're going to be dropping, so on their respective days, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button so you can stay notified. If there's a team that you like, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date when we drop those videos. With it being 32 videos, we do have to film a lot of this in advance, so keep in mind that this video is being filmed on July 25th. So if there's anything in this video that's out of date with injuries, training camp news, etc., just keep in mind we filmed this on the 25th. Today, we have a guest joining us, and this is my buddy Sean Landry, who's a big Saints fan. And I asked Sean, hey, why don't you join us for this video because you know a lot more about this team. You've been keeping up with everything throughout the offseason, so Sean, welcome in.
Appreciate you, man. Good to have you. It's definitely been an exciting training camp, to say the least. New era, new head coach, new quarterback, new team. There's some reason for optimism. There's some reason for skepticism, just based on the way the last few seasons have went. But excited to see how this goes, and can't wait for the season to start.
The Saints, I think, are being touted as one of the teams that doesn't have a shot to contend, which we'll get into everything, but we just want to start from the very beginning. With offseason happening, they fired their head coach, Dennis Allen, along with his coaching staff. In comes in Kellen Moore. Now, what are your thoughts on the hire of Kellen Moore?
I like it just because he brings some youth and some up-tempo type of vibe and feeling. You look at his track record in Dallas, what he did with Dak Prescott, what he did in LA with Justin Herbert, and then what he did this past year with Jalen Hurts, I think speaks volumes. He's going to bring in a different type of swag. The Saints in recent past have always gone with what's comfortable. So making this outside hire is putting him in a situation where it's uncomfortable, but for good reasons. So I like the hire, and I'm excited to see what he does in his first year.
Moving on, though, to the free agency and the trades, the adds and the losses that happen. We'll go ahead and put the graphic up on the screen. Brandon Cooks comes in to replace Marquez Valdes-Scantling as that wide receiver 2. Rashid Shaheed also operated at some points last year as that wide receiver 2. I would say the key signings were Justin Reed, Chase Young being re-signed as well.
Yeah.
Where are they getting this money?
So, thank Derek Carr. When Derek Carr ended up retiring, he gave back $30 million. I think that was kind of the struggle to which they were going to approach this offseason was centered around Derek Carr. You have him on the team, so you literally are cap strapped like we have been in years past. And so I think by Derek deciding to call it a career, freed up some of that money. But if you notice too, Hassan, they haven't really gone out and made big splashes this offseason. They've kept the players that they've wanted to keep, signed the guys that they've wanted to sign, but make them on team-friendly deals, knowing that we're going to be in greener pastures starting next year and the year after in terms of the salary cap. So bringing in guys like Shough, bringing in guys like Reed and Cooks. It's not so much about the dollar amount, it's what they can bring to the team in terms of experience and depth. But then again, nothing is guaranteed in the NFL, so these guys may be cornerstones going in this season, but could be departing after this season as well.
When we look at the losses that the New Orleans Saints had, we talk about Tyrann Mathieu retiring. Another guy that retired was Ryan Ramczyk, but if you compare it to 2024, it doesn't really matter because he didn't play last year. But that offensive line and also the defense, a lot of key pieces were lost. Do you feel like that the Saints did a very good job in replacing them?
Yes and no. I say yes just because they've replaced some of the guys that they needed to replace. You look at Shane Lemieux, you look at Ryan Ramczyk. You lose 2 guys on the offensive line, which is what you need in order for your offense to be successful. However, they've supplemented that in the draft. Getting Kelvin Banks. They've re-signed key guys. They're moving Trevor Penning in the inside as well to kind of also free up some space. So yes and no. And then also where the losses hurt us too is wide receiver. You signed Brandon Cooks, but the common comparison for Brandon Cooks is Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. All 3 are literally the exact same person. So, the whole thing that we've been looking at this offseason is we need a big body receiver. We need a big body pass catcher that we haven't had since Michael Thomas. And so, guys like Keenan Allen's name has been floated. Gabe Davis has been floated. So, we still are looking for that big body receiver. But again, I like the talent that we have, some of the guys that we already have in place, some of the guys that have come in. So it's just a matter of seeing how these pieces work together and see how that cohesion really permeates as training camp gets underway and ultimately we head into the preseason.
We talked a little bit about those draft picks. Kelvin Banks being that first-round pick, I think everybody was watching intently on which quarterback are they going to take in the first round.
Surprised me.
It makes sense, and we'll talk about it when we get to the depth chart, because that whole offensive line is filled with, besides Eric McCoy, a bunch of first-rounders.
Right.
But Kelvin Banks, you like that pick a lot.
Absolutely.
The second-round pick, Tyler Shough, that's where they got that quarterback.
Yeah.
Were you on the edge of your seat? Which quarterback are they going to take? Tyler Shough, Shedeur Sanders?
Jackson Dart, actually. There was a lot of noise leading up to the draft about, Jackson Dart being the guy. I believe it was at 9 that we picked that. And so, going into that draft, I was waiting to hear them either call Shedeur or Jackson at 9. But when they took Kelvin Banks, I was like, okay, it makes sense. First-time head coach, he's bringing in a new offense. You need pillars to anchor that offensive line. So a guy like, Kelvin Banks, who's been a 4-year starter at Texas, helps solidify that position. And then getting Tyler Shough in the second round, I also read leading up to the draft too that they did a private workout with Shough. They liked his mechanics. They liked what he saw. I'm sure many of your viewers saw that wonky throw he had at the combine where he tried to throw it off his back shoulder, and it was like, who are you throwing to?
Yep.
But one thing I like about him, and I've been watching a lot of his Q&As this offseason with the St. Brown brothers, with Mina Kimes, he's talked about, the one thing he's talked about is his experience in college, playing for 7 years. He feels like that experience, that adversity that he's overcome with the slew of injuries makes him more battle ready. I honestly, Hassan, I think he's going to be the best quarterback in this draft class this year, just because I feel like out of all the guys that have been drafted, both ahead of him and behind him, I think he's the most NFL ready of them all.
Brendan Broughton, Jonas Sanker, which we talked about off camera, we feel like eventually could be a starting safety. Danny Stutzman, who I really liked at Oklahoma.
I like him too.
Yeah,
I like him too. He's got some swagger. I'm hearing some good things about him in training camp. So I think he's also a diamond in the rough too, in terms of who at that position, especially with DeMario now hitting age 36. And so I think he could also be a long-term answer at that position too.
Do you know his nickname?
No, I do not.
Communion.
What is it?
Communion.
Communion.
He's the cracker with the juice.
I like it.
Quincy Riley, Devin Neal.
Man, I like Quincy Riley, that type of corner, that ball hawking type of presence. Another key piece we've lost in the offseason was obviously Lattimore and then recently Debo. So I feel like he could be a plug and play day one starter. Devin Neal, and we'll talk about him in a little bit too, but he's actually turning some heads in training camp right now. And all the buzz has been on Kendre Miller because obviously this is his third year. This is make or break for Kendre. But Devin Neal is certainly turning some heads. And could very well, compete for that number 2 spot behind AK. So,
yeah, and let's talk about those projected starters of the number 2 guys, number 3 guys, when we look at the depth chart, starting with that offense, with the quarterback, and then we'll get to skill position in that offensive line. We believe that it's going to be Tyler Shough. He's going to start all 17 games if he's healthy.
It's neck and neck between him and Spencer Rattler. I mean, Spencer Rattler took the first team reps on Wednesday, looked very polished, looked very good. Tyler Shough looked good yesterday. But I think Spencer is definitely going to put in a fight and, try to make a case for himself, too, as QB1.
Yeah, and as of right now, we're penciling in Tyler Shough to start and lead the helm for the New Orleans Saints offense. Alvin Kamara already gets it done every year in and year out.
Yeah.
So there's no question about that. But the number 2 guy, number 3 guy, Kendre Miller versus Devin Neal. Which one is it going to be? You think it's going to be Devin Neal?
I think it's going to be Devin Neal. And, that's something that we talked about off camera about a surprise pick at the running back position. I think it's going to be Devin Neal, all-time leading rusher at Kansas. He can run in and out of the tackles. He can space himself from defenders. I think he's going to give you that type of boom and zoom that we saw with Ingram and Kamara. I applaud Kendre for sticking with it. He was basically thrown to the side when Dennis Allen was head coach. Now that you got a new head coach in the building, it's kind of a fresh start, and that's how Kellen has given everybody in the building a fresh start. However, we just don't know what we see out of Kendre. We've seen glimpses of him at times, but he's just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And you need to stay healthy, especially in a long season of 17 games.
Last year, he was kind of healthy. He's put on IR.
Yeah.
See, listen, I haven't seen anyone hate a player this much. Like Dennis Allen hated Kendre Miller for some reason. Since Mike Shanahan and Robert Griffin III. I don't know. For some reason, he just didn't like Kendre Miller.
Yeah.
But moving on with the skill position players, the wide receivers, we think Olave's obviously the number 1. The 2 is going to be Brandon Cooks. Rashid Shaheed's going to work in a little bit more as a deep threat in the slot receiver. And then tight ends. I mean, that's going to be a
Oh,
That's a little bit of a mess with so many injuries with Foster.
so many injuries. And then, again, we found out yesterday that Dallin Holker, who was our UDFA, who had a lot of promise last year as a rookie, suddenly announced his retirement yesterday. And so, that now creates a huge hole in the tight end room, because who are you going to play on the other side of Juwan? Is it going to be Seth Green, who came up from the UFL with the Arlington Renegades? Is it going to be our 7th round pick, Maliki Mataval, who from UCLA, who's got some lanky pass catching? He's primarily used as a blocking tight end in college, but I think he's got some receiving capabilities. So
the way that the offseason planned out, it didn't seem like Juwan Johnson was a priority re-sign.
anytime you go from a wide receiver to a tight end conversion, it takes time. And, Shough wanted him there. He wanted him as a tight end. And there was word this offseason that Shough was trying to poach into Denver. It seems like, Denver is trying to get a lot of former Saints players. But, Juwan actually called Kellen directly and asked him, hey, what can I do to be a part of this team? What do you envision me for this offense? And so I think by Kellen giving him a chance, and plus Kellen has worked well with tight ends too. So his contract I wasn't a big fan of, just because that you're giving guaranteed money to a guy who hasn't really lived up to the billing. But then again, now with all these injuries, he's pretty much going to be the only guy you've got at that position.
Then the offensive line, there's no question about this, is going to be very solid. And actually looking at it, first round picks outside of Eric McCoy.
Right. And it's make or break for Trevor Penning this year too, Hassan. He came in as a first round pick, left tackle. He got injured right before the start of the season. He comes out, he struggles mightily in both training camp and in times when he was playing throughout the year. Obviously, we drafted Taliesin Fuaga at the right tackle position. Then we shift those two guys around, move Trevor to the right side, Taliesin to the left. And then you start to see some glimpses of promise out of Trevor at that position. But he's also embraced this new role at the left guard, and he actually thinks he's going to do quite well. So I like these guys that we've got at the offensive line.
But moving over to the defense, I personally think most of the time they're going to run a 3-4. There's going to be certain packages where they run a 4-3, and at that point, I feel like Danny Stutzman is going to be utilized a lot more. Chase Young is going to be more of like the hands in the dirt defensive lineman.
One guy that you don't have on there, and it's the question is how they're going to utilize him this year, is Brian Brzee. Another first-round pick we've had, has done really well in the middle as an anchor on that defensive line. I've noticed this offseason we've been signing so many guys to the defensive line, and now going from a 4-3 to a 3-4, it makes it difficult because you're trying to make sure you're trying to give equal reps to everybody. So the question, while I like the Gottschall signing, it also ponders the question, what happens to Brian Brzee? I've got a good friend of mine who's a Clemson fan, and I actually asked him, I said, has he ever been used at the edge position? Because there's talks about maybe putting Brian Brzee on the edge. And he told me, he's like, well, they really didn't utilize certain packages in college for him on the edge. He was mostly a nose tackle in the middle. So I'm excited to see how they utilize him, but it's just because we've got so many bodies in that defensive line room. I mean, we just recently added Jonathan Bullard from the Vikings. So, and then you bring in a coach like Bo Davis, who has worked well with defensive linemen, and then Vernon Broughton, who we also drafted. So Julian Blackman is I think is a wild card, just because I think Jonas Sanker, who we drafted out of Virginia, who was also a huge contributor in college, has a very good shot. I think it's ultimately Jonas Sanker who ends up becoming your day one starter when we open up the season.
Yeah, we'll see how that defense will play out. But looking at special teams, I mean, there's not really much to talk about. Just the usual cornerstones.
Can we have Younghoe Koo? Is that possible? Can we facilitate some sort of trade? We'll give you Groupie. We'll take Koo.
Well, I thought he already played for the Saints last year when he was the reason why all of the missed field goals, man.
Yeah.
That's brutal. But anyways, so let's move on to the stat projections. Like we mentioned, the quarterback, we have Tyler Shough. That's going to be starting 17 games, we think. My mentality is if you open week 1, you don't get injured. But what we have projected for him is 3,800 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. Which you look at those numbers, TD to interception ratio is not the best, but for a rookie, 22 passing touchdowns, it's pretty decent.
It's pretty decent, yeah. I mean, I kind of had that similar number to you as well. I mean, his final year at Louisville, he was 3,100 yards, he was 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Playing in a pro-style offense under Jeff Brom. I think Kellen is going to utilize his skill set. I see, and I know this is a stretch, When I look at Tyler Shough and his frame and his arm and his build, I see similarities to Josh Allen. And I see that in terms of his frame, the build, the arm, the physicality in terms of being able to run when needed. I mean, Josh Allen is he's more known for being a pocket passer, but runs when he needs to, and a very efficient runner at that. So, what I have for Tyler this year is I've got 3,500 yards. I'm going to go with 68% completion, and I'm going to do 25 touchdowns and 12 picks in his first year.
But moving on to the stat projections for the running backs, Alvin Kamara is always going to get it done. This is an average of the last 2 years with the plethora of quarterbacks that they've had. So, throw in Shough, throw in Rattler. It doesn't really matter who the quarterback is. We still expect him to have over 1,000 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns, and then he gets it done in the passing game. He's probably going to be the most targeted receiver, maybe outside of Chris Olave. 90 receptions, 639 yards. But then I personally am not giving up on Kendre Miller. I know that you have Devin Neal up there, but the running back 2 in that offense naturally gets somewhere north of 100 carries or so.
Yeah. I applaud you for not giving up on Kendre. I would like for him to do well too. I mean, again, new system, new head coach, new fresh start. I mean, who knows? He may even turn heads. But right now, all the focus has been on Devin Neal, and I liked him coming out of college. I liked the pick. I liked the selection. All-time leading rusher at Kansas. He's not necessarily going to be the bell cow behind Kamara. But I think he's going to definitely take some of that pressure off of Alvin in terms of the number of carries, the number of rush yards, to where Alvin's not having to feel like he's having to take every snap for all 17 games.
Yeah, moving on to wide receivers. These are the guys that are going to get it done for Tyler Shough that he's going to be targeting. Chris Olave, 131 targets, 83 receptions, 1,012 yards, or 1,112 yards.
Yeah.
4 receiving touchdowns. Now, this is also an average of the last few years that Olave has played with, again, the plethora of quarterbacks that they've had. So throw in Shough, throw in Rattler. It doesn't really matter. He's still going to get north of 1,100 yards. And then Brandon Cooks, we have him operating as that wide receiver 2 with 51 receptions, 4 touchdowns on top of that. And then Rashid Shaheed being that deep threat, averaging 16.2 yards per reception, 36 catches, 583 yards, kind of matching Brandon Cooks as far as receiving yardage goes.
I think Chris Olave last year was his worst year of his career so far. Since he's been in the league, he only had at that time, 400 yards in 8 games played, and he only had 1 touchdown. For a guy who is our #1 receiver, who has so much upside and promise and talent in years past when he first came out of Ohio State, that concussion he sustained last year against Carolina really knocked him out and created some injuries where a lot of people wasn't sure if he was going to be able to come back and play this year. I see him playing 16 games. I'm going to go 1,200 yards, and I'm going to go with 11 touchdowns for Olave this year, to where he's going to earn that contract extension that is actually being talked about with him. So
it's bold.
It is
11
bold.
touchdowns.
Yeah, because this is also a make or break for him too, because they haven't picked up his 5th-year option. They're talking whether or not they should give him an extension after this year. And so I think this year is a bounce back year for Olave. Again, health. That's going to be the biggest thing. Nobody wants to see a head injury to any player, especially somebody like Olave, who's already sustained them before. So I think if you were to ask me who are the 2 top targets that they're going to primarily throw to this year outside of Kamara, I think it's going to be Juwan, and I think it's going to be Olave.
Well, moving on to Juwan, what I personally have projected for him is 65 targets, 44 receptions, 484 yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. But if you feel like that he's going to be heavily targeted, do you have anything different?
I have about the same, if I'm being honest. I think about the same. Again, how he's going to be utilized. Again, we've seen how Kellen has utilized the tight end position in his stops with Dalton Schultz, with Gerald Everett, and then just recently with Dallas Goedert. How the tight ends are being utilized in his systems, I think, is a benefit to Juwan, just because given his size and his frame and his athleticism. But again, he hasn't been able to break the ceiling in terms of his ability and what he can bring to a team. And so I see him about that same stat line as you're seeing him too.
All right, and that's the stat projections that we have for the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And then moving on to the last segment of this video, we have record projections. And what I like to do is not just give you an expected, this team is going to go 4-13 and anything outside of that is wrong. I like to provide a window. At the absolute worst, we have the Saints going 1-16, I feel like. At the absolute best, they could go 7-10.
That's the Falcon fan in you.
Hey, listen, yes. But also, they're in the conversation of having a high draft pick. Maybe Arch Manning is within reach if Tyler Shough does not work out. What are your thoughts on maybe an expected projection, but also what's the floor and the ceiling?
I definitely don't see them one win. Vegas odds have them at 5.5, over under at 5.5 games won this year. I at worst see them 5-12, what they were last year, but even maybe a step up at 6-11 as their floor. The ceiling, could be 10-7. Tampa, I'll take a page out of Tampa. And that again, Tom Brady retires. Everybody expect the Bucs to take a major step back. They brought in Baker Mayfield. They brought in a new offensive coordinator. And then they end up winning, 9 games their first year? I see 10-7. A lot of people are sleeping on the Saints right now. Nobody is really giving them a chance. Everybody thinks they're going to be in the basement for the whole year and expecting them to pick top 5 next year to maybe draft Arch if he decides to come out, or Garrett Nussmeier. And I was just curious, what did people project Sean and Drew when they first came to New Orleans? They projected them to be the 29th out of 32. So again, at the bottom. Nobody expected them to really turn things around because they're coming off of a hurricane-ravaged season. They were coming off a 3-13 year the year before. Everybody expected them just to kind of do what the Saints do and, not breed success. And then what did they end up doing their first year? Go to the NFC Championship. I'm not saying the Saints are going to do that per se. I don't think they'll necessarily make the playoffs this year just because, again, while Mickey Loomis doesn't want to admit that this is a rebuild, it's a reload. I see it as a rebuild just because you're bringing in a new regime, new coaching staff, new system, everything. And I think 10-7 is going to be the floor or be the ceiling. I think 6-11 is going to be the worst. But then if you want an actual what I think they're going to end up this year, I think 8-9.
My mentality behind that was I was looking through the schedule of the Saints, and I was kind of focusing in on what I call swing games that could go back and forth. So I see those being all division games. Potentially the Saints could split.
We always play you guys tough either. And we somehow always end up splitting the series with you every year, regardless of how both teams are projected.
Even with the Panthers and the Bucs, even. I mean, last year, it was pretty close. The last game of the season between the Saints and the Bucs with Spencer Rattler at quarterback. So it's tough. The division games are. Other swing games that could go back and forth, the Patriots, the Jets, the Titans. So that was just my mentality. If they win or if they split, then they could win a few more games. But I mean, you have them going 10-7 as their ceiling.
It could be next year that we could be sitting here having a similar conversation. They could be in the playoffs next year, but if I'm being real honest with you this morning, I'm going to tell you 8-9, I think is what we're going to end up finishing.
Well, you heard it here. So if it happens, you guys have to subscribe. But that's going to wrap up our video. And Sean, I appreciate you joining us.
Thanks
so
much for having me. No, you're great. Always good talking with you. So I tell anybody who has here on this channel, definitely subscribe. Stay tuned. Stay up to date with him. I mean, Hassan does a really, really great job with his work. Always appreciate having these conversations with you, and looking forward to seeing many more of your listeners, your subscribers, and then many more people like myself coming on and talking about their team.
I appreciate that. Thanks for the love. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button so you guys can stay up to date when we drop the video. Tomorrow's video is going to be the Detroit Lions. So if you guys are a Lions fan, make sure you guys stay up to date with that. Any last words as far as the Saints go?
Who dat, man? Let's go.
Couldn't have said it myself. I won't say it myself. But appreciate you guys joining in, and I will see you guys tomorrow.